Welcome to episode 9 of the CP Performance Podcast. This is going to be a synopsis of Hedvig Lindahl's interview. We're going to have a look at self-reflection, self-awareness and what that actually means, and how to improve long term. And then we're going to discuss managing senior athletes, what I've learned from being around several senior players, including Hedvig, and also the questions that would continually get raised on a daily basis, which would make you as a coach think. And then we're going to touch on what these questions actually mean to athletes and how they can inform us as coaches. But before we get started, just a quick message from our sponsor. Playa is a new smart football tracker designed to utilise GPS technology and give you personalised sports science advice. For more information, go to playersmartcoach.com. And to be in for a chance to win one of the Playa Smart Football Trackers, join our mailing list and follow us on social media at CP Perform UK. Hello and welcome back. So what we're going to do first really is start to have a look at what self-reflection is and also what self-awareness is, because that's a huge part of it. But the first thing I'll actually do is recommend quickly a TED Talks video. The Value of Self-Reflection by James Smith. If you are interested in self-reflection and helping yourself develop, then yeah, this is definitely worth going and watching. It's only about 11 and a half minutes, so it's 11 and a half minutes well spent. So if we actually look then at self-reflection, so the Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the activity of thinking about your own feelings and behaviour and the reasons that lie behind them. So just thinking about this definition then gives us a slight indication as to why self-awareness can be such an integral part of the self-reflection process. So what does self-awareness actually mean? Well, self-awareness is having a clear perception of your personality, your strengths, your weaknesses, your thoughts, your beliefs, your motive and an emotional awareness as well. But being self-aware isn't all selfish. It allows you to understand other people and how they perceive you and your attitude and your responses to what you've done in a particular moment. If we just consider emotional self-awareness then, so if we take our understanding emotionally of a situation, we can adjust it to the behaviour or to be able to deal with a situation positively instead of constantly taking it as a negative thing and beating ourselves up about it. A couple of great things about being more self-aware or emotionally astute is that you can actually understand and recognise when you're starting to get more stressed or you're put under more pressure. And that's again one of the key points to a self-reflection process, is looking back on those situations. What made me stressed? Why? How? When? And actually being able to differentiate between the good reactions you've had with that stress and the poor reactions and negative responses you had to it, and why. Finally, that sort of emotional maturity, I suppose, is what self-awareness really is as you spend more time doing things and being in more situations that are stressful, being in and around people, you actually develop to understand them better and you can build better relationships. So why is this important for an athlete? Well, as an athlete, you need to be extremely self-aware of what you're doing, when, where and how in every situation you're put into during your sport. So you may get over-aroused and a bit too excited and put in too hard a tackle and get a red card. Well, that's a moment of self-reflection, but you need to be self-aware of why you did that. So what it was leading into that situation that brought you to that aroused state where you was over-emotional and actually then put yourself or someone in a really compromised position. Really, the best thing as an athlete as well as developing your self-awareness is to be able to work on your weaknesses so that you can learn to manage them better, be less likely to put yourself in those compromised positions, whether it is being like overly aroused because of the crowd or whatever, or overly emotional and actually freezing and choking. You can learn from them and use them experiences to better develop to reach your goals further down the line. So then from a coaching perspective, well, how does self-awareness impact you as a coach? Over the 8+ years I've worked in elite sport, there were loads of situations where I've been exposed to different stressful environments or scenarios, whether it's pressure being put on you by the manager or whether it's actually pressure being put on you by a medical department or a player to get them back quicker, or whether it's the actual environment itself in the playing field where that is highly emotional. Then you need to be aware of actually what makes you tick as a coach then. What is it that actually helps you cope with the stresses of those external things coming in, or the excitement from the crowd, or the noise, or whatever. As a coach, it's as important, if not slightly more, that you're on top of your game to make sure that the athletes that you're working for are on top of theirs. And I was fortunate enough to work under Emma Hayes at Chelsea Women for 4 years. We had an environment driven by self-reflection, critical appraisal of yourself, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't self-aware of how and when I acted the way I did. And one thing that always used to come up in my reviews with management was I was always wearing my heart on my sleeve, and I would personally go above and beyond if I thought it was necessary for the player to get what they needed to get. I wouldn't mind ruffling the feathers of management or whatever to try and get what needed to be done really. And other coaches that I've worked with had always said, you very much speak your mind and you don't like to sort of beat around the bush. But if I wasn't aware of the situation I was in and how I could deal with it and the potential comebacks from that, then I wouldn't know how to deal with that actual stressful situation itself. So for me, it was the ability to actually reflect on myself in those situations that helped me develop those skills even further, to actually get what needed to be done for the players I was working for actually done. And without my awareness of how I would cope with situations and how I prefer to, have a style of argument, then if I wasn't aware of that within myself, my own self-assessment, then I wouldn't have been able to self-reflect on how the situations went and how I best handled it, or learning how to deal with relationships with individuals, because there'd be one way to get something out of one person, but another individual within the management team, you'd need to discuss and argue with them in a different way. Not necessarily argue, even like debate, but it would be very different approaches. So you'd have to have that ability to self-reflect and sit back and actually go, well, what is it that this person in front of me requires, and how have my previous confrontations with them before ended up if I use strategy A or strategy B with that individual. And self-reflection is not a tool that's used like solely in sport. There's plenty of literature out there within the fields of education and medical students that actually shows how a powerful a tool it can be, and how it can really help progress individuals through their educational careers. And as an athlete, you are actually a student to your sport, so you are continually trying to develop and educate yourself so that you can be better at what you need to do on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis. So let's then take that and actually look at some of the components of reflection. So you've got, first of all, this is coming from Frederick Nelson and his paper in 2013. So you've got different components. So we'll look at the process. So how are you reflecting? You've got the outcome. Why are you reflecting? You've got the content, what is it you're reflecting on? And you've also got the stimulus, what is causing you to reflect. So there's 4 things there that you need to consider when you're thinking about self-reflection, as well as your ability to be self-aware, because it's that ability to be self-aware that actually initially kicks off the reflection, I suppose. That almost answers your stimulus question there. What's causing you to reflect? Well, is it something I did? Is it something someone else did? Or was it a situation I was put in, or someone else put me in? What was it that actually makes you think, I need to really think about this and hone in on this so that I can make sure it's perfect for next time? So let's look at the process of reflection. So what is it you're actually going to do to reflect? You're going to sit down, have a little meditation and think about things? Are you going to write a journal or a log? It's proven that in quite a bit of research that medical students that actually have a reflective log or journal actually start to progress and perform better than those that don't. So are you going to write your thoughts down, your emotions, how it made you feel and what that situation felt like before, during and after, and what you wanted to do and how you actually responded? So the next component then is content, and that's integral. What is it you're actually reflecting on? Is it your response? Is it your emotional response, your physical response? Is it someone else's response? Is it the way you handled the situation before or after? Because there's very, very different responses in and different things to be thought about if you're reflecting on a situation to how you responded after it compared to how you really felt during it. The final piece of the actual self-reflection then, and this particular component model, is your outcome. What has this actually helped you achieve, and has it given you any particular strategies to help you not do that again, or to help you actually do it again so that you get the best out of that situation that you was experiencing? So I hope I've given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour into some of the areas of self-reflection and self-awareness. I don't want to go on for this for hours because it's a huge topic. There's hundreds and hundreds of papers in and around it looking at education self-reflection, sports self-reflection, and medical professionals and musicians and how they develop themselves through the self-reflection and self-awareness processes. So again, I'm just going to say it's definitely worth watching that TEDx Talks video from James Smith on the value of self-reflection, because it's really good and it's only short. You've listened to this and you'd pretty much be all the way through it by now. And if you want to, reach out and follow me on social media or whatever and have a chat about different strategies that I've used before in the past, or even ask me for a few more examples or whatever, reach out at CP Perform UK on Facebook, Insta and Twitter, and come and have a chat. I'm always up for a chat and sharing experiences. That would be great as well. Okay, so let's then start looking at what it is to manage a senior athlete. So I was fortunate enough to work with several whilst at Chelsea. They won't mind me mentioning names. Obviously, it was obvious who it was, with Katie Chapman being the legend that she was there, and the captain, and Hedvig as well. And then we had some more very, very experienced, not quite as old, but very experienced individuals as well, such as Gilly and Annie and Claire Rafferty as well. So huge amounts of international experience, and slightly more senior athletes, like late 20s, early 30s. Now, they're not old, but they're actually at a point in their career where they've been doing it, especially when the women's game has started to develop, for 10, 15 years, and competing at that level for such a long time actually takes its toll on the body. So then we have to start considering, well, what does each individual athlete need? So on a daily basis, you'd have considerations about what the player did the day before, 2 days before, 3 days before, how they respond, having listened to them. That's the key. Listen to what they need. And, you'd be actually on a daily basis, you'd be actually asking yourself and them questions in and around, well, what is it we did over the last 48 hours, and how has your body responded to it, and how have you responded to it before in the past when you've done something similar? Raising a question with them, is 1 day's recovery going to be enough? Do you need 2? Is 2 days recovery then going to set you back a little bit because you're going to feel a little bit more sluggish, so we're going to have to adjust training session on a day 3? And you end up being in a situation where you are actually having to accommodate quite a lot of things. When I was first getting involved in strength and conditioning, I used to think that the answer to anyone's problems or pains was actually to train harder and train more. And then you start to listen to and experience situations with these athletes who have been doing this for 10, 15 plus years. And it's actually a case of, well, if I do more, I won't be able to compete. So that's where it comes down to, and what it boils down to really is listen to the athlete and understand what it was and is that they need to be doing to make sure that they can compete. And you also have complex and simple things in this that can be adjusted on a daily or weekly or monthly process, which help to manage that athlete. So for instance, when working with Katie Chapman, she used to get really, really aggravated knees through doing heavy squats or things like that. So for us, that was a no-go. That wasn't something that she would do, because it would aggravate her knee. It would mean she couldn't train properly. It would mean then she couldn't be competing on a weekly basis. So what would we do? Well, we still needed to stay strong and fit. So we would use something like a prowler push, which would limit the knee flexion and extension patterns, but still give us time under tension and strength, and or speed and power if we lightened the weight and sped up the movement, but unilaterally as well. So we would get lots of bang for our buck from one simple exercise. Make sure she's doing that regularly. Make sure she's working on things that would complement it as well. So Katie always was doing things like step ups from a slightly smaller box, potentially with an overhead reach or something like that, just to change the stimulus and the balance. But we'd work on specific things for her. And Hedvig's very much the same, because her power sessions or goalkeeping sessions were so specific towards that power development. A lot of the bits and pieces we did in the gym prior to her build up into the World Cup, so like the year of 2016, 2017, was all in and around sort of tissue conditioning and making sure that she was able to continually tolerate all of that hard work she was doing as a goalkeeper. So for me, as a senior goalkeeper, it was never about me trying to improve her jump height or me trying to improve her power in the gym, because I would work with the goalkeeping coach to incorporate those bits and pieces on the grass, so that she was making sure she had individualized sessions on the grass that she could get that power out. Then when she stepped into the gym, it was about me listening to her and understanding from her as a senior athlete. She knew her body, what she needed to do. So on one day she might come in, she might do a really good strength session. The next day she might be like, I'm exhausted, I need to do a lot more recovery, or I need to go home and go to bed. And that's it's always quite hard for an S&C coach when you're first learning and first developing to actually understand that sometimes less is more. And I think it goes a long way to be actually able to turn around to a player and go, no, yeah, you're right, go home, go to bed, go home, go have a good meal, or go and get some soft tissue. Don't worry about doing a set of back squats today, because ultimately that isn't what you're doing. That's not your sport, that's not your bread and butter. What you need to do is compete on the grass, train on the grass and play hard, so that you can keep competing and training and playing for the longevity of your career. That's your bread and butter. Our stuff in the gym needs to be adjusted and accommodated every now and then to make sure that we get the best out of you as a player. And just so you're aware, I'm not smashing back squats. You know, they're one of my preferred exercises for myself as well. I'm just using that as an example because of the common prescription of it. This then starts to raise a couple of questions, doesn't it? It's like, how as an athlete do I speak to my coach about this, and then how as a coach do I start to develop the relationship and awareness of my player to actually understand them? And a lot of it does boil down actually to just working with each other over time, a little bit of trial and error, but most importantly listening to each other and trusting each other. Hedvig was always great because she would always ask lots of great questions. Same with Katie. But they would always trust me to help them make the right decision, but the decision ultimately was theirs, because they're the one that had to do it. So for instance, when it come to Katie's knee being flaring up and being aggravated, it was never a case of, well, you have to do X, Y and Z. It was a case of, let's try and find some strategies and let's give it a go. A little bit of trial and error. Let's try and find this. Well, I know that this movement pattern requires less knee flexion extension, so it's less likely to piss it off, but we can still get a really good strength gain. And same with Hedvig. It was a case of, well, actually, you know, you need to tell me how you're feeling so that I can get the best out of your gym session that I've planned. But ultimately, my gym session is planned in pencil. It doesn't matter if it changes, because I'm working with you on a daily basis, so we can make up for it somewhere down the line. So that point then will make you think, well, if I'm not working with an athlete on a daily basis, then I'm less likely to change something because I need to get it out of them anyway. Well, no, because you need to get the best out of them each session you're working with them. It's always quality over quantity. So sometimes it might actually be a case of scrap the session or drop it right back to the bare minimum, so that you can get the best quality out of them in that point, so that they can go on and do another good quality session the next time. Might not be the next day, might be 2 days later, but that's what it's all about. It's all about, for me, quality over quantity. You don't want to be putting massive weight on someone's back when they're tired just because your program says that it should. And that's a self-awareness thing for you and your athlete then. You need to reflect on your prescription rates and your ability to adapt and overcome these situations, because if you're not aware of what's going on in your program or how you can adapt it and how you can still get them from A to B, even though you're taking a slightly different route, then you as a coach aren't reflecting and doing them any favours, and them as a player are not self-aware enough that actually I need to take a step back because I'm tired or whatever. So again, like, self-reflection, self-awareness all ties into this part of actually helping to manage a senior athlete. And you do get a better self-reflection, a better self-awareness with exposure, with experience and with emotional maturity. I think that's one of the keys there, is being more emotionally mature and astute to what's actually going on with yourself and your body. That self-awareness is key when working with senior athletes. So one of the strategies I used and used to use it quite a lot when I was at Wasps Academy and at Chelsea Women as well, was to do like whiteboard type sessions. So it sounds very, very old school, but I'd have a plan in my head of where I wanted the session to go and what I wanted the session to be. And I'd have components of the session that I knew I wanted to have in it, but I would then put things on a whiteboard and let players pick and choose. And there would be specific things in there that they would have to pair together or something like that. But the components of the actual session, push, pull, hinge, squat, that kind of stuff, were always built into it. But the way they went about it and achieved it would be slightly differently for each individual. So some of them might see a rep scheme on there and follow that, or some of them might see like a recovery day rep scheme on there and follow that. And it would give them a bit of freedom and a bit of choice. But it would also allow me to sit and watch what they do and watch what they pick. And I'd try and remember from the last session, or I would write it down from what they did and give them feedback into the next session. Well, that last session we did, yes, you did exercise A and B, but you only did the lighter set sort of rep scheme. So let's see if we can push today. How do you feel? How was the grass session? Can that impact on your pushing today? You know, I know what the session is coming up in the next day on the grass. I know you can push, like those kind of things. So if you're able to do that, then that would help as well. You know, it's actually, as a coach, sitting back and going, well, I know what to expect out of the next grass session. You know, I'm going to encourage you to give a little bit more here, so that, you know, that's beneficial for both. Or I know what's coming out of next grass session. I'm going to encourage you to do the recovery type stuff because you're actually exhausted already. So I want you to do whatever exercise or drills it is we have, but at that recovery rep scheme and load intensity prescription. I hope that kind of makes sense. What I'm trying to say really is that when it comes to learning how to manage your athletes, you need to actually watch them pick and choose and actually watch them make decisions, so that you can then help best inform them. It's not about you telling them, it's about you giving them choice and education. I've always defined the role of an S&C coach to educate and facilitate. It's not my job to make them do it, it's my job to tell them what to do and why, and help them to go and do it so that they can be better at what it is they do on the grass. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, was because I want to help educate and facilitate. I want to help bring questions and ideas to the table, and I want you guys to listen to this and bring more questions back. But I also want to give you the means and the resources to actually start thinking about, how is it that I can, from today's topics, how is it I can self-reflect? How is it I can be more self-aware? How is it a better strategy for me to manage my athletes, to learn how to manage senior athletes? Well, there is no right or wrong answer. There's lots of answers. There's hundreds of answers, because every answer is dependent on every person that's in front of you and every coach that's standing behind the athlete as well. You know, so I just thought I'd give you a few of my opinions and share some experiences of what we did and why, so that you can get a bit of an idea as to different strategies to manage a senior athlete, different ideas, and what I think has been quite a successful approach over the last 4 years with the Chelsea women's team, with their senior athletes. So I hope this was an insightful synopsis. I really do hope it brought some questions to your head. Please, again, if you've got any questions for me, then give us a message at CP Perform UK, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I'll always get back to you as quick as I can. So just want to thank you again for listening to the episode. Subscribe, follow us on social media at CP Perform UK, and again, sign up to our mailing list if you want to win one of the Player Smart Football Trackers. Thank you.